Hello and welcome to this revision video on Weimar Nazi Germany from 1918 to 1939, focusing on key topic 2, Hitler's rise to power from 1919 to 1933. This session is going to be looking at how Hitler became Chancellor in the years of 1932 to 33. And today's content is going to be focusing on the political developments in 1932 with the roles of Hindenburg, the president, Brüning, von Papen and von Schleicher, the three chancellors before Hitler, and the part that was played by Hindenburg and von Papen in the political deal and ultimately leading to Hitler becoming Chancellor in 1933. In addition to this, there will be an exam-based question at the end where we'll talk through the interpretations question, and as this is the most likely to come up in the exam on Thursday the 9th of June. So let's focus on the content by looking at the political developments in 1932. In the April of that year, Hitler was the leader of the second largest party in the Reichstag, and had also come second to Hindenburg in the 1932 presidential election and had won 13 million votes, which is a significant amount considering where they were in the wilderness years some 4 years earlier. Within the Reichstag, Chancellor Brüning didn't have much support and was dependent on Article 48 decrees. Going back to key topic 1 of the Weimar Constitution, this was where the president could overrule the Reichstag and create laws without their consent. However, Brüning did lose the support of Hindenburg the following month due to the failing to deal with the economy and was replaced by von Papen. A reminder of the wider context is that in 1932, that was when the significance of the Great Depression was hitting Germany very, very hard as a result of the Wall Street crash 3 years earlier. There was a further election in July 1932, and the Nazis became the largest party in the Reichstag, winning over 35% of the vote. Despite being the largest party, von Papen stayed on as Chancellor, with Hindenburg preferring him to lead rather than Adolf Hitler. There were further elections in November of 1932, so we've got three Reichstag elections in the same year. However, this did show a dip in support for the Nazis, but also a dip in support for other centre parties, with votes actually going towards the Communists and other nationalist parties at this time. By the end of 1932, von Papen had lost the confidence of Hindenburg and replaced him with Schleicher, who was a left-leaning chancellor. So now we're going to focus on the political deal. Now, Papen, who had just been ousted as Chancellor, met with Hitler in early January 1933 to propose a coalition government with Nazis and nationalists working together, with Hitler as Chancellor and von Papen as Vice-Chancellor. The army and the major landowners at the time were convinced that this would stop Schleicher's plans and a possible communist takeover. Just a reminder that in the last elections in 1932, the communists started to increase their overall vote, and that Schleicher was siding with the left rather than with the right, and that the army and major landowners were worried about this continuing. As a result of this, Papen managed to convince Hindenburg that this coalition would bring stability to the country, and that Papen himself would be able to control Hitler with him as Vice-Chancellor. And so therefore, by the 31st of January 1933, Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany through legal and democratic means, as set out in the Bamberg Conference and the Wilderness Years between 1924 and 1928. So that's the end of the content, and so we're now going to focus on a couple of exam questions that could come up within the examination on the 9th of June. So first off, we're going to be looking at the idea of the reasons why Hitler became Chancellor in January 1933. Now, you can look at the idea of the long-term causes on this one by going back to the Wall Street crash, or you could go back to the idea of the increase in the support that we looked at in episode 3. But there is a way of looking at this from just this particular video. So reason number 1, we can look at the idea of weakness of government. So the key evidence for this is that you had successive chancellors, and your specific detail would be Brüning, Papen, and von Schleicher. They couldn't deal with the aftermath of the Wall Street crash on Germany, and they were left paralysed by not being able to form a single-party majority government. Just a reminder that proportional representation is the idea of a political system where the percentage of votes won equals the percentage of seats, and it is very, very unlikely that you're going to achieve more than 50%. The Nazis, with all of their support, only actually achieved less than 40%, and so therefore still wasn't enough to secure a majority. The second reason is the political deal, and so therefore that's the deal between von Papen and Hitler to form a Nazi nationalist coalition, and this therefore led to Hitler becoming Chancellor because Hindenburg was able to agree with that. You don't have to worry about evaluating as to whether or not this is a good thing. You just have to talk about why this led to Hitler becoming Chancellor in January 1933. The third reason is to do with the idea of the widespread political support for the Nazis. So your key evidence here is the elections of 1932 led to the Nazis being the largest party in the Reichstag, which normally leads to their leader becoming Chancellor. You can qualify this by saying that Hindenburg was reluctant to do so, and therefore needed the convincing of von Papen in order for Hitler to become Chancellor at the end of the day. But just a reminder, you don't need an introduction, you don't need a conclusion for this particular question. You just need 3 aspects of knowledge or 3 reasons in order to achieve band 4 marks of between 10 and 12. So we're going to be looking at another different type of question now, and this is the interpretations question on why Hitler became Chancellor in 1933. Just a reminder, you are given 2 interpretations to identify the key arguments from, and this can be within the 4-mark question, otherwise known as question 3b. So if we look at this first interpretation, we need to identify what is the main argument that this person is talking about with regards to why Hitler became Chancellor. So the key thing here is to make sure that you read through the entirety of the interpretation and to ensure that you summarize it in no more than a few words. So if you read through this interpretation, then the key thing here is that weakness of government is the key argument. The reason why it says this is because of the idea of the collapse in businesses and increase in unemployment. The moderate parties of the Weimar Republic could not agree, and the Reichstag was bypassed. Those are 3 different areas there that would suggest that there's a weakness of government. In terms of the second interpretation, this one talks about the idea of von Papen and talks about the political deal itself. And so therefore the key argument overall is the idea that the political deal was the main reason why Hitler became Chancellor in 1933. So the 20-mark question would actually ask you, how far do you agree with either interpretation 1 or interpretation 2 on why Hitler became Chancellor in 1933? We have to remind ourselves of the way in which we actually answer this question, and that we structure it through what's called the quickie system. So first off, we need to find a quote. So interpretation 2, the main quote from that is that von Papen said that he could control Hitler. Our inference, the I, is that this suggests that Hitler's power could be restricted in order to ensure Papen leads the government rather than Hitler himself. Our contextual knowledge on that is that Papen convinced Hindenburg that the coalition would mean that Hitler's chancellorship could only survive with the support of the nationalist parties. The cabinet ended up only having 2 Nazis in the executive, with the rest coming from other parties. In terms of our explanation, we need to talk about why that leads to Hitler becoming Chancellor. So it leads to him becoming Chancellor as Hindenburg was incredibly reluctant to give the Chancellorship to Hitler, despite the Nazis being the biggest party in the Reichstag at the time, and that von Papen was there to basically to moderate and to tone down Hitler's power. And then we look at the evaluation. So we can say that this is a weak argument because it's the continued refusal by Hindenburg to give Hitler the chancellorship, and this could have actually led to civil war in Germany. Therefore, Hindenburg would have had to have given the chancellorship to Hitler at some point in 1933, either with or without the political deal. So key tips for this particular question type. You need to make sure that you actually refer to both interpretations for this question. So the plan that's on the left-hand side would only be enough to be able to get you half marks. You have to look at interpretation 1 as well, and then to conclude to say how far do you agree with interpretation 2 that you've talked about already. So is it the political deal, or is it something else that would be in interpretation 1 as to the main reason why Hitler became Chancellor in 1933? You need to support it with your own knowledge, and you need to ensure that you drive the answer with what's in the interpretations rather than your own knowledge. Don't put in anything additional to say another reason for it. It's all about the interpretations. So that's the end of this particular video. The next video will be on key topic 3, which is the chancellorship to dictatorship and the creation of the Nazi state between 1933 and 1939. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to these videos.